Welcome back to Creative Thinkers. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and we have a very special guest today, Isadora Stone. She is an artist / professor at El Paso Community College. Isadora, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. Are you excited?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Very, very cool. So we're going to have a little conversation. First thing I want to ask you is, are you from El Paso?
No, I'm from Las Cruces.
Are you? So do you live in Las Cruces currently?
Yeah. I've lived here my whole life. Gone to Las Cruces public schools, went to state universities for my undergrad and graduate study.
During the time that you were at elementary school and middle school and high school, did you have any influences from anybody as far as creativity is concerned?
I think mostly my dad. He's an artist, and he always had our home kind of filled with artists or people from all over the world, and he was extremely creative. So growing up, that's kind of how I saw how to interact with the world and how to understand the world, was through art. Like if we went on a family vacation, we would go to a museum or we would go to a gallery, and he would talk about the artwork. And I kind of thought that's what everybody did growing up, was you traveled to see art shows. But I guess other people go to theme parks and do other kinds of things when they come to So that was an interesting kind of awakening. But we also lived in Oaxaca, Mexico when I was little too. And I feel like that was a huge influence on the color palette that I use, and the brightness and the way that kind of I use color and want to be around color all the time. So I think those two things were kind of like the biggest influence on my creative process and understanding the world and understanding my place in the world, and how art was just what I loved doing. I would make all my own clothes in high school and my own jewelry. And I was just always doing creative stuff and always taking art classes and always trying to learn how to do different things and making stuff with friends. I was just always creating. I just loved doing it.
From a young age you did, right?
Yeah, from a really.
And that was something that your dad pushed on you, or was that something that just kind of inherently was within your blood system?
I don't know. I've thought about this a lot. Is it nurture or nature? Because I have I have 3 other siblings. 2 of them are doctors, and one of them owns a finance company. So they didn't bring that into their worlds as kind of the way that they needed to express themselves, but they're very creative people. And growing up, I don't think our parents really pushed us to become artists. It's just kind of, I just felt like it got into my bones, and it just was the way that I interacted with the world, and it was home to me. It's still kind of the way I understand everything, and it just never left me. I've tried to have it leave me working for nonprofits or doing different things with my time, but it's always been there. And yeah, I don't know. I do wonder if it's nurture or nature.
Right. You always have to wonder that, because I think it's interesting that a lot of people don't think that they have it running through their veins as far as creativity is concerned. But I feel like, on the contrary, everybody has it running through their veins. So once you finished up your kind of high school and college career, did you immediately run into teaching? What kinds of things did you do? You mentioned nonprofits. What kind of work did you do there?
So after I did my undergrad, so I got a double major in cultural anthropology and art. And so I've always been really interested in working with students and teaching. And I had done that all during undergrad. I was working with, at the time we called it at-risk youth. It's really just people who are marginalized from major culture and from having access to a lot of things. So
Right.
I was really interested with working with students who were kind of in this place where they were kicked out of the regular school, so they were in this alternative school, and working with them creatively. And I just saw so much transformation and how people would open up, and just how the arts was such a conduit for that kind of relationship, and for them, for the world, and for getting through a lot of really hard situations. And so I was kind of hooked from then on to continue teaching. So after I got my undergrad, I worked in the juvenile justice system, actually teaching art to incarcerated youth.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really, you know, I just really wanted to help people find that, especially in a very kind of dire circumstance, where maybe they have given up on a lot of other things or have been told they're not good at a lot of things. So I love that. And then I ended up working for a nonprofit where we would work with students to help them before they would go into the system. So it was a way to kind of do violence prevention and arts education. It was with NMSU in the criminal justice department. And that was a wonderful grant. We helped so many people. And then the Bush administration actually cut that grant. They decided we didn't need it, even though we had the stats to prove that it was working and it was doing amazing things. So I went back to school for my master's in public administration. And I took my first stats class and I realized, like, I'm not, this is not for me. And
the numbers aren't for you, right?
like, no, I don't like this. I like to help people. I don't, it was the hardest class I'd ever taken for me because I have a math disability. So it was like, I was working against all my nature and I was just thinking, you know, why am I going against all the things that I like to do? I love to make work. And so I applied for the master's program and I had a small child at the time. So I couldn't really apply anywhere else. I had to stay in New Mexico. I got into the department and part of it was teaching. So we got to teach college courses and it was amazing because the teaching I had done before was a lot of behavioral modification. And this was just all about the arts. And so it was kind of a freedom and openness in teaching that I hadn't experienced before. And then having to articulate things I never knew how to talk about because, you know, there's a lot when you're making work that you don't really, you just do automatic. Like there's just so much about what we do as artists that's just innate. And like you've been doing it for years and years and years, you don't even know that there's a word for it, a way to explain it. So getting to do that with students was like, it just informed me so much about my own practice and what I wanted to do. And it helped me articulate all these things that I didn't really have words for before. So that's when you know, it was another time of falling in love with art again and teaching and just understanding that, yeah, that's what I'm meant to do. That's what I love doing and informs my work. My work informs the teaching. Like it's this wonderful symbiotic, cyclical relationship.
And the fact that it comes full circle to you, is that something that began with these students early on, where they were changing the way that they were thinking about things? And what do you think is the advantage for these students? What did they learn? Can you give us an example of anything?
Gosh, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the catalyst for me doing that was I had lost my mother pretty early. It was kind of like this, and I had had a lot of problems in high school and socializing and kind of meeting the expectations. And I just felt like the world wasn't built for me, but I felt like the art was always a way that I could interact and I can understand the world. And so I tried to take that to my students. And I would see people who were in, you know, just really terrible situations. You know, when you're young, they don't have a lot of control. And it brought them so much more understanding and confidence about who they were. It didn't even have to do with the art. It was just like, yeah, there are these things I can do. And it would build them up. And to me,
so do you think that it was therapeutic then?
I think it was therapeutic, but sometimes I don't like saying it's therapeutic because I think it takes away from the academic and the rigor part of it in a lot of ways that exist in the same time. I think it does all those things, but I think it's therapeutic because it's a way to also understand the world and have this multiple openness and flexibility about how you see the world and how important it is to come at problems and all these with lots of different solutions and know that there are many different solutions for everything and there's many different layers to everything. And that it's not a black and white world. It's this very multifaceted, multidimensional world. And I think art helps people do that. So I think even if you're, you know, a scientist, excavating that and you know, really getting into your creativity helps every aspect of your life. Not just therapeutically, you know, I think it's also about the rigor and the creativity and the innovation that you do in your life. So I think making art, being creative is something that everybody needs, and it's accessible. Like you said, we're born with it. Like it's not something you earn. It's something that exists, and then you just create it. you make it better, like a skill, like playing piano, right? You just put the time in and you get better and better. That's it. It's open to everyone.
So saying that it's open to everyone means that literally every person on earth has this kind of ability, right? Do you
Yeah.
think that creativity only comes in making art or writing a book or making a movie, or can somebody be creative in other ways?
Yeah, you can be creative in all different kinds of ways. You can see patterns that are different and put those together, or two different things that don't match. You know, you can be any different discipline and use creativity to problem solve and to see the world differently and to make new discoveries that would not be possible because you're looking at something from a different vantage point. I mean, I just feel like it's a skill that we need so much in our world to kind of heal our world and innovate and problem solve a lot of inequalities that are happening right now.
And I think it's interesting that we're going through a lot of issues right now with the whole COVID thing. And
Yeah.
we kind of have to stay home right now, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that one of the things that people should be doing is thinking outside the box a little bit more? Because, we're sitting at home. If we kind of stay within these boundaries, then we might lose it, if we can say that, right? If we can use that word. But if we start to allow our minds to be a little bit more free, then we can start doing things a little bit differently. Maybe it's time to paint my house.
Yes.
Maybe it's time for me to update my yard. Maybe it's time for me to update my wardrobe. And speaking about wardrobe, I noticed that you are wearing a beautiful dress. Can you tell us what's going on with that beautiful pattern that you have on your shoulder?
Oh, thanks. These are just silk screens of my images that I put on fabric because it's not enough that they live on in all my work. They have to live on my clothing and everything else. I love having that like fingerprint on everything kind of in my world,
Does that help your everyday, do you think?
Yeah, I think just thinking that, oh, that's something that I own, I can change that, or that's something that I have, I can do that, or if this can become this, I think, yeah, it absolutely helps me with anything, even like cleaning the sink, or like, I don't have a tool for that, but I can make that tool to figure out how to do that thing. So I think that way of coming at the world kind of helps everything I do, everything academically, the people I interact with, my career, my relationships. I mean, I just think creativity is just the key to so much. And then once we recognize it in ourselves, like you're saying, people at home, I think this is such an opportunity to try things that you never had time, space to do before. I mean, even if it's getting a $10 watercolor kit and just watercoloring or coloring in a coloring book or doing puzzles or anything that kind of moves you into a different space than you normally would, that's huge. That's a lot of creativity. Taking a walk somewhere you would normally go, all that stuff, creates more neural pathways and helps you to kind of grow and become more flexible and see the world in different kinds of ways.
That's an interesting statement that you make, because who knows what the world is now going to become after we get out of COVID, because we have been kind of stuck in this little bubble for a while and we've had to figure out new ways of doing things. So I want to talk a little bit more about the creativity that's sitting behind you. The work of art is beautiful. Let me just say that first of all. Did you start making work like this? You said that you printed that onto your dress on your right shoulder. Is that the way that you make your work? And have you always worked this way? Can you take us through a little bit of kind of a chronological order of the type of work that you've done throughout your career?
Sure. I used to work very big, like 9 feet by 6 feet kinds of portraiture. I did a lot of female portraiture, oil on canvas. And I was really interested in portraiture, but specifically giving attention to women in Western art and the art historical record, and just people who I knew as well. And was very into Alice Neal, Andy Warhol, people who immortalized other human beings and that kind of language. And then when I had my child, I really couldn't paint with oil paints in my home. I couldn't have an outside studio. I couldn't paint on that large scale. I found myself getting extremely frustrated when I would try to work the way that I used to work, because it would be, 7 uninterrupted hours or whatever it was. And with children, you can't do that. So I adapted my work. I cut up a bunch of my drawings and I made a toolbox that I put all my supplies in. that were water-based and they were non-toxic. And I would just move into every room she was in. And if she was playing for 30 minutes, I would draw for 30 minutes on these small little 4x4 squares. And it was a way to feel like I could get work done. And then I also had this thing. And then that's when I actually started thinking about doing installation work, because I couldn't get a big piece done, but I could get hundreds of small pieces done. And what would it look like if I put these hundreds of small pieces together? And so that really ignited this whole idea of doing installations. And I've also always been interested in the psychological component of art making, and how do you pull people in, and how do you get people to sit with the art and really be in it? And I thought, if I could take over rooms and areas with this work, then I could get them in that space where they could just kind of forget other things and be in that space.
Create environments, huh?
Yes, environments. Yeah, very much so. So out of that work, it just grew and grew. It was a lot of drawing and painting, but acrylic painting. And then I got this artist residency about 4 years ago at the Charles Adams Studio Project in Lubbock, Texas. And it's a phenomenal place. It's amazing. And I was able to make a lot of screens, burn a lot of screens, and Texas Tech University let me use their laser cutters. So I was able to translate all of my drawings and paintings into screen prints and into laser cuts. Well, at the time, like it was like 100 things then. And then I decided to make these installations where there were drawings. Well, my work had evolved where I was drawing on the walls and I was using light and color with the work and the paintings. But with the silk screen and the laser cuts, it kind of pushed it a little bit further, because then they would kind of erupt out of each of the piece. Like these laser cuts would come out, and I could do a lot more repetition, because with the silk screen, it's a process where you have the same image and you can make the same image over and over again. So things that took me hours and hours, I could now get done in a matter of minutes, which for every artist, that's like the best. So my work really grew in that way. So I started doing screen printing, and then I started doing screen printing on large circles and on plexiglass, like what's behind me, and utilizing light sensitive paint. So my work glows in the dark. And so in the daytime, it has one life, and in the nighttime, it has a different kind of life. And then in these installations, the light is projected on top of them. So when you walk in, for instance, an installation I had in, we'll talk about the latest one was in Colorado State University. When you walk in during the day, the work looks a certain way. And as the light changes, the work starts to change and everything changes with you. So I like this idea of, as people interact with the work, that the environment changes, they change, their idea of it can change. They can come during the day, it's one way, they come during the night, it's another way. So it expands this language for them, and it expands a way for them to reach it in different kinds of ways.
And is that multifaceted in the same way that you have been multifaceted throughout your life? We always have to continue changing, right? Is your work changing because you are changing as an individual?
Yeah, absolutely. I started integrating video a lot into my work. The first time was at the Juarez Contemporary. I had an installation of my drawings. I started to make them move in the video. And that was interesting to me, because I was like, I want to play with this idea of those images moving in another kind of space. Like they're on the wall, but what if they're also projected onto the wall and they're moving? So I started incorporating that, and then that led to something else with more video and it being projected onto different shapes. But yeah, it's just a continuous, every time I do a show, I try to push the limits of what it is and make it even more complex and make it even more of an environment. Like I'm just trying to get that environment to be so inclusive each time.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the word environment, because we are ultimately a product of our environment. Yeah. Do you feel that at the end of an experience in this installation / environment that you have created for the viewer, they will have changed?
Oh, I hope so. That's like, it's funny that you say that, because a lot of my interests are in transformation and enlightenment, and I'm hoping that it will have a lasting impact. I mean, I went to James Turrell's exhibition at the Guggenheim. I don't know if you know which one that is, where he transformed the entire Guggenheim into light. And I had this like for me, that was a transformative experience for me. I went into that room and there were all these people lying on the floor, and you're supposed to be sitting in all the chairs, right? Like that's how
Right.
it's made. But everybody was like, I want into this, you know? People are lying on the dirty New York walked on floor, just looking up and wanting so badly to be a part of this thing. And to me, that was like, it was transformative. I thought, I want to do that. I want people to come in and be like, this is for me. I want to experience this. I want to be a part of this. So yeah, I do hope it's transformative in that way. I mean, that was the catalyst for a lot of it, but also how that transformation happens is so interesting to understand for each person. Like I had a show where I got there late because it was out of town and nobody knew who I was, and I was standing in the middle, and I just would hear people walking around and talking about it, and I was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever, because they didn't know, you know, they don't have any, they weren't trying to make me feel good, or they weren't thinking about my feelings. They were just exclaiming and taking selfies and wanting to be a part of it, you know. And I just thought, oh wow, it's reaching them in different kinds of ways that I had no idea would even happen.
And I think that's one of the things that's interesting about the power of art. A lot of people don't really understand the concept of what art is. They see it on a wall, they might see it in the backdrop of a movie or something like that, but they really don't understand what the experience is. And isn't it, in your opinion, a beautiful thing to see it kind of transpiring while people are viewing it?
Yes. And as educators, like we know that feeling when we see, you know, people kind of see themselves. It's really like a coming to yourself, you know, it's falling in love with yourself, seeing yourself in this other thing and recognizing it and being like, oh, that's a part of me. That's also me, you know? So yeah, it's a wonderful thing to see people to do that in the classroom and in a gallery, any setting where they see the work and they feel themselves in it, and it does transform them in a different kind of way, I think.
When you first started doing smaller paintings, well, actually you started large scale paintings, then you went down to small scale paintings. When you were presenting those, do you see that the viewer has changed as well? Are they experiencing it in a different light now?
Ooh, that's a really good question I've never thought about. And you think I would?
Yeah, because when you approach something small, because I know that I have made very large scale works. I've done huge murals, you know, 20 feet by 20 feet, 30 feet by 20 feet, just big. And then I see people experiencing the little ones, and I see that they get really intimate with these small pieces. But now that you place them inside these environments, they have that same level of intimacy in a giant setting. What do you
Yeah.
think? Do people change? Do they experience it differently?
Well, the interesting part is I have these really big forms and then I still have really small forms, because I love that aspect, like you're talking about, of going in installations when I would work in like 4x4 or 2x2, and people would be so close, you know, they would be breathing on it, and they would be looking and seeing all the things. And so even now I still do that. Like I have the small pieces that I see people going up really close to, and then I have the larger pieces that people also look at in a different kind of way. But yeah, that's an interesting aspect. Yeah, I've kept that part of it.
I think that you need to bring the people kind of through a voyage within your pieces. When you start off with very, very large scale pieces, then you go into smaller pieces. It's almost like these waves that people go through, right? And it's a wave that you as well are going through. So when you started creating these prints on the walls, well, not on the walls, on this plexiglass, what kinds of things do you incorporate into these pieces? I noticed that on your actual dress, you have some kind of natural element, but I also see something that appears to be maybe like birds, butterflies. One of them, I think, looks like a plane. Tell us a little bit about the little details.
Boats, planes. I'm really interested in things that are transportation and how they take us out of where we're from. So actually the boat that I'm wearing is, my stepmom gave me a picture of the boat that my great grandfather came on to America on. So it's
wow.
the Fornesca. And so I repurposed that ship. And I think a lot about that, like how he left his whole world, all the language, everything. I was just like, I'm just going to go to a place so far away and I'm going to figure it out, you know? And I like, and such a risk, what a risk, you know, like,
absolutely.
And I just love this idea of like, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm going for it. And I'm thinking about what, I'm just going to be open to what's going to happen. I have no other choice. And so I use a lot of transportation, like airplanes and going to different places, and how much that changes us. Like, I know that when I've traveled or been in different places, it's completely changed my worldview. I mean, of
it's all about growth, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the elements are growing out of houses. So I'm talking about this idea of self and how it grows and changes, and how it's this alive kind of thing. It's not this I was born here and this is what happened. When we look back on our lives, we're only looking back at it from the age that we are now. We are not really
Right.
looking at it in a real kind of way, because memory isn't actually reliable. And so it's this thing in flux. And so I like to have these elements growing out and having this surrealistic aspect to them. Like the planes will have like a bow trailing behind it, and they'll be in a wrong scale against something else to kind of show that it's more symbolic and it's a metaphor more, so I like
that some of the birds are the same scale as some of the planes, which I think is just creates this kind of juxtaposition between that and also the colors themselves. Like, I really like what you're doing with the piece in the background, where you only have a hint of color as opposed to the ones that are next to them, which have a whole lot of color. I also wanted to ask you about, do you feel that you are in some way grounded by all of these natural elements, and then you kind of push yourself into these kind of traveling elements, like the nature is my world, but then I can go somewhere else and grow, but I can also grow here if I need to? Is that kind of a thing that's happening within your pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, being so stationary, I've been in Las Cruces, my whole life, and I've traveled a lot, it's all over the world. But I think that I keep coming back to this one place, and I think that what you're talking about and seeing in the work is reflective of how I think about the world. It's like, there's this idea of home, and how much does it change when I go to Hong Kong and spend time there, and then I come back, and like, what have I learned, and what is that going to change in terms of who I am here? And yeah, I'm really interested in that, and this idea of connection and interconnectedness, and how we think we're so separate. You can go to any border in the world, and people really feel that what's on that other side is so different than what's on this side, and it's just not the case. We're so similar. And I also am very interested in how we're unconsciously connected. Like, I'm really interested in quantum physics and quantum mechanics and string theory and all these ideas about interconnectedness, because my own philosophical idea about the world is that we are connected. Our consciousness is actually this huge thing that we're all kind of tapping into.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's where that's coming from, with those repeated symbols in the work and how they interact with each other. It's like, that's everybody too. It's not just me. It's everybody else all together in this kind of way. That makes sense.
Yeah. So Isadora, I had one last question. What do you have coming up in the future? Enlighten us.
I have some shows that have been put on temporary hold. One in Chile and one at Western State University in Silver City, Beacon, which I'm going to use a lot of light and push a lot of light through the plexiglass, actually. So it'll be a new kind of installation for me with video and plexiglass. And I'm working on a book for marginalized artists, a workbook about how to kind of navigate the art world and making art, and the psychological things that come with creating a daily practice of art. So I'm hoping to have that published within the year.
Very nice. And is there some way that people can get a hold of you or maybe contact you or see your work?
Yes, my website, and it's just my name, IsadoraStowe.com, and Instagram at Isadora Stowe, and Facebook, Isadora Stowe. You can find me on all the platforms.
Very cool. So I'm glad you're out getting everywhere on the media. I wanted to thank you for being our guest. This was a wonderful conversation about you, who you are, and your artwork. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. Thank you so much. This was so fun. Flew by.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. So I wanted to tell everybody thank you for joining us at our studios. Obviously, we're in the middle of COVID right now, so we are in studio doing the best that we can through these connections that we're making online. So once again, Isadora, thank you very much.
Thank you.